since you brought that up, why don't you tell us about Christmas Eve and the day that your dad died?
Well, I think Dad died around 10 o'clock that morning. I'm not sure on that.
And you were 4, right?
I was 4, would be 5 in about, in March.
Mm-hmm.
And anyhow, she knew at that point that he was dying, I'm sure a few days before at least. However, Dad never accepted the fact he was dying.
Mm.
And anyhow, she by that night, she had my uncle, knowing that he was dying, had driven down. He was single at that time, and he had driven down to help her bring things back. And I remember the old car packed up with blankets in the back, and she had her family on the train that night.
Christmas Eve night.
Christmas Eve night. So you can imagine what all she went through trying to take care of that.
Yeah.
And then she was so anxious to get back home because this is where her support group had been. And she had been down almost a year in San Antonio and had left her home and left all the furniture, had rented that out. So, and then she finally gets everybody settled on the train. And the boys, one boy went with my uncle and the dog driving back to Parsons. And she had the other 3 boys and myself, and we kind of, of course, having a pass on the railroad, we couldn't be in the fancier cars, so we were in the older cars, and where the windows opened. But anyhow, she kind of got me settled down, put my head on her lap, and covered me with her coat. And anyhow, she kind of looked so sad. I think I remember trying to make her feel better. So I told her that Santa Claus was going to come the next morning and that would make her feel good. And I can remember looking at her expression and thinking, that's an odd expression to that. And she kind of looked away for a while, probably trying to control herself. And then she said, "Oh, honey," she said, "I don't think he's going to come tomorrow. Or this, I don't know whether she said tomorrow or this year." And I thought about that a while, and I said, "Do you mean that just because my daddy died, Santa Claus won't come?" And at that point, she really had a startled look on her face, and then I said to her, "Oh, he'll come. You'll see." And then I rolled over and went to sleep.
And then what happened?
And then the poor woman, having lost my husband just almost 2 years ago, I'm just in awe of the fact that she could do all this and be that thoughtful of somebody else. And she managed to talk to the conductor, and then I guess he talked to the engineer and everybody else. This was back in a time when trains prided themselves on being very much on time. And she told him that she needed to buy a doll. And so she talked him into talking to somebody else, and he apparently called, and I'm not even sure what town it would be, halfway between, I think it was Dallas, Texas, someplace like that the train was going through there, and this was back at a time when they had very nice gift shops, but the gift shops closed at nighttime. But I think it was the conductor who called the guy who owned the shop and told him the situation. He got up out of bed, came in and opened his shop. They told Mom she had a very limited time to go in there, and make find a present. And she went in and tried to pay the guy for the doll. Of course, he wouldn't take the pay. He said no amount of money would pay me to come out of bed on Christmas Eve night. But he gave her the doll. And anyhow, when I woke up the next morning, I had the doll with me, and I looked up at her, and I said, "See, I told you it'd come."
So you were right all along.
Well, I guess that's when I started believing in miracles.